Hey folks, welcome back to Frankenstein. So we're in volume 1, chapters 1 through 2, and we're going to look at cast of characters today. Before we do, I just want to point out some themes you should be looking for. One is this absent or present mother or father. Look for absence and presence. That's an important thing to look for. Secondly, watch for the role of women in the novel. They do absolutely play a role in it. The protagonists and the antagonists are male. For sure, but women are important in this novel. And you might also watch for the angelic woman, the perfect woman, so to speak. You also want to, of course, keep your eye out on relationships or a lack of relationship. That's a major theme in this novel with friendship, isolation, father, sons, all of that. One interesting thing that you've noticed is names or the lack of. The 1818 edition is not written by Mary Shelley, it's written by the author. And of course, it's not unusual for novels at that time to not name an author, but it is interesting in light of what happens in the novel. Notice how long it's taken to get to Victor's name. We're on page 22 in the Norton's edition before we finally get to his name. And although Shelley gives us Victor's father's history in chapter 1, we won't get to his actual name, which is Alphonse, until a little bit later on. And of course, the monster doesn't get a name either, and I really think that's quite significant. So look for that and ponder why that's the case. Why doesn't the monster or the creature get a name? He's just monster or creature. This is also in keeping with the classic 1931 film version of Frankenstein, which really informs how a lot of people look at the novel. They get their ideas of the novel from the movie, and the movie and the novel are quite different, which you can see here. Victor Frankenstein, for some strange reason, becomes Henry Frankenstein. Elizabeth stays Elizabeth. The monster, though, in keeping with the novel, does not get a name. In fact, the person who actually did play him is the very famous actor Boris Karloff, who will play him in the 1931 film, and also the film Bride of Frankenstein, which is hilarious, and if you have a chance to watch it as well. If you're not familiar with Boris Karloff, in 1966, he will become the voice of the Grinch. So if you ever watch the classic How the Grinch Stole Christmas, that's Frankenstein who's talking. I will tell you here in these chapters, particular the section we're looking at today, there are significant differences between the 1818 edition, which was in 3 volumes that we're using, and the 1831. And you can do some research on what those differences are. I'll point out one that's really significant here in a few moments. We're just going to look at the cast of characters. We're in the section of the novel where you're getting all this background information. That's really important to understand the rest of the novel. So here is a slide that someone else has put together, my thanks to them, in which they have the Frankenstein family. You have not yet met, over here in the corner, this Justine Moritz. You have not yet met her. You will soon. But I want you to look at that. Just pause. Oops, sorry, y'all. Pause that for a second. Who's missing? Do you see? You will hear in just a minute. So we meet Victor's family, and we also meet Victor's best friend, which is Henry Clerval. So Victor's family. We're constantly trying to take notes throughout this thing that's going to help you in writing and help you have a greater appreciation for the novel. But how would you describe the Frankenstein family? Feel free to pause this little lecture and write down what you think about the family. How would you describe the father? Same thing, pause if you want, write down how you want to do it. These are very important questions, I think, for understanding Victor. Victor's family, he's Genovese. He's from Geneva, which was a French-speaking town. The folks would have known German too, but Victor Frankenstein's native language was French. And he tells you about the languages he learns: English, German, Latin. French is his native language, which against, I think most of us think that he talks, or his native tongue is German, but actually he's French-speaking. Geneva was a republic. It had no king or no queen. Victor talks about the syndics, so his family comes from a very prominent family, politically connected. They're not poor. And the early 1800s population of Geneva is around 30,000. So that's smaller than Morristown, Tennessee. Geneva, here's a map of it, just to give you a little bit of an image. When you're thinking about Victor's father, you might compare the relationship between Victor and his father with the relationship between Victor and his creation. That could be an interesting essay that you might want to write at some point. Also, when it comes time to assign blame, how much, if any, does Victor's family, in particular his father, get or deserve? People like to blame parents for what their kids do. That's something very common. Here's a meme, not very funny, but it's the best I can do on quick notice. They like to blame parents for what their kids do. So as you think about this section, come back to it later after the plot unfolds. Does Victor's dad or family deserve any blame for his son's decisions and choices? I will tell you this, and it's pretty obvious if you're looking at Volume 1, Chapter 1, that Victor is absolutely set up as being the son of a good man. There's a quote here from the novel that his marriage, Victor's father's marriage, illustrates his character. And so you'll have to read that story about Caroline Beaufort. I'm probably messing up her pronunciation of her last name, forgive me. And think about what that tells us about Victor's father. Now, here's a really significant relationship, and that's Victor's cousin in 1818. This is his cousin. It'll become his girlfriend, and eventually his wife. Cousin Elizabeth. They are first cousins. What's striking about her origin story is that when she's an infant, her mother dies. There is some fear of a stepmother. Sorry for my mispronunciation. Her dad tells Alphonse, sorry, I'm going to get confused on this part. But anyhow, there's a fear of the stepmother. I'm just going to skip over that so we can move on. Fear of the stepmother. Look at what her dad says when he urges her adoption. Although it's interesting to think, would her father have given her away if she had been a he? In the 1831 edition, Mary Shelley is going to change Cousin Elizabeth into an orphan. So evidently Mary Shelley, for some reason, thinks that the cousin-cousin relationship needs to change. They'll no longer be kissing cousins. Also, as a sidebar, Elizabeth was Percy Shelley's mother's name and his sister's name. I'm using this book at times as one of the sources for my reading. It's really good. The new annotated Frankenstein, quite good. And it makes the point that actually, I guess Mary Shelley had toyed with naming Elizabeth. Cousin Elizabeth would have been Cousin Myrtella. Quite different. This is just from that annotated Frankenstein. I'm not going to read this, but I do want to point this out to you. It's just got some nice little background information on it. And this quote here from Barbara Johnson is really interesting. This is her take. She says, all the interesting, complex characters in the book are male. The females, on the other hand, are beautiful, gentle, selfless, boring nurturers and victims who never experience inner conflict or true desire. That might be something you might keep in mind as you look at the women in Frankenstein. Whether you agree or not, that could be the basis for an interesting essay. One other thing is that Percy Shelley, pseudonym was, he liked at times to go by the name Victor. So perhaps that's why Victor is Victor in the novel. Don't know. We meet Henry Clerval, Victor's best friend. And how would you describe him? How would you describe his education, his relationship with his father? Something to look at. You might want to make a prediction about how he might figure into the story and how he might figure into the characterization of Victor. Now we come lastly to Victor's brothers and Ernest. Oh, bless Ernest's heart. He's 6 years younger than Victor, and he doesn't really play a role in the story at all, which brings me back to the slide at the beginning. Who's missing? Ernest, the troubled middle child, is not present in that slide, and he's not present really in this novel. I'm not sure why she included him, but anyhow, he's there. The last of the three Frankenstein boys is William, and William is going to play a significant role in the plot. Mary Shelley's father, her half-brother, and her own son, one of her sons, were all named William. In fact, the one baby William is alive while she's writing this novel. He'll die as tragically very young. Interestingly, if she had been born a he would have been named William too. If Mary Shelley had been born a he would have been named William too. My mom one time told me if I had been born a girl, I would have been named Susan Sobiek. So there you go. As we end chapter 1, what overall image do we have of Victor's family, of Victor's life? And how does that either go along with how the plot will continue, or does it go against it? Does it make his family blameworthy for what develops, or is Victor really much more to blame for his own decisions? How would you describe the Frankenstein family? Anyhow, hope you guys have a good day. Take care. Bye.